Hello and welcome to Inside 11Alive News Investigates. I'm Jonathan Martin. Well, already in 2025, TSA has intercepted nearly 90 guns at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the vast majority of which were loaded. And an 11Alive investigation found, despite warnings that offenders will be arrested, Atlanta police are rarely pressing charges. Savannah Levins joins me now to go behind the investigation. So, Savannah, what all did you find?
Well, Jonathan, we found via Open's records request that of the 87 times TSA intercepted a gun at Atlanta's airport in the first 4 months of 2025, only twice did someone actually face legal repercussions.
I'm so sorry. I completely forgot.
How did you forget about this?
Nearly every single day,
It was a complete honest mistake.
TSA workers at Hartsfield-Jackson find a gun.
Yeah, it is.
Round in the chamber?
No. Oh, yeah, there was.
Last year, Atlanta police issued a warning. If you bring a loaded gun to the airport, you'll be charged with reckless conduct.
Magazine, weapon, holster.
But 11Alive News Investigates found of the nearly 90 times it's happened in the first 4 months of 2025, only twice did APD file charges.
Once we, again, determine that there's nothing nefarious going on, we can return the weapon and they're free to go about their business or continue their travel.
Airport Commander Major David Wilson says the department has opted to not file charges if officers believe it was an accident, especially because updates to state law in the last decade allow for guns to be carried in the main parts of Georgia airports, anywhere before TSA security.
That we have to follow the state law. In other states, it's different.
You're welcome. Put that back in there.
Yeah, just put in your card and come back through the security and go from there.
But not without a price. TSA slaps offenders with fines, anywhere from $3,000 to nearly $15,000, according to TSA spokesperson Mark Howell. Does TSA worry that these civil penalties aren't enough to deter this from happening?
We're all working together to try and find ways to get these numbers down. We are making some progress. We got a long way to go because we're still finding hundreds in Atlanta every year.
In one of the 2 incidents that did result in an arrest, the suspect, a TSA agent, dropped his loaded pistol, which, quote, showed disregard for the safety of others.
Something could happen in an accidental discharge.
That's exactly what happened in 2021 when a traveler's gun went off in their bag at the TSA checkpoint, causing panic.
I don't know what happened. Everyone's just running. Literally, everyone came out of security just running.
If you can shelter in place, shelter in place.
Major Wilson says officers do run the guns through a system called ACIC, checking if they've been stolen or if the traveler is a convicted felon.
You have to go ahead and check the person. You have to check the firearm.
But we found even that isn't always happening.
ACIC is down.
In at least 2 instances this year, that system was down.
I'm sure it's fine.
Officers handed the gun back to the passenger anyway.
You're not going to get anything back for it, or you're not even going to run it, or? All right, you good to go.
Are you worried that this might come off as if you bring a gun to the airport, there are no consequences?
You don't want to create an environment where it's, hey, I can do this and nothing will ever happen to me. Or I can try them and I can just say it was an accident. I mean, if you are actively trying to do something and violate the law or circumvent security, there are consequences and you will be, charged.
Savannah Levins, 11Alive News Investigates.
All right, Savannah's back with us. And Savannah, one of the things I think that stood out to me was that we heard the officer in some of the body camera video say, just put the gun back in your car. Is that common?
Yes. Well, in a lot of these cases that we looked at, it was pretty common. And, obviously we see car break-ins all the time at the airport. So I did ask about that. And here's what Major Wilson had to say.
We do everything possible not to let that occur. We encourage people to make sure that that weapon is handed back off to, a family member or a friend, someone else who can take possession of it and not have to do that. I mean, we look at that as an absolute last resort, but if they want to continue traveling and they're on a timeline, there's not a lot else we can really do because again, once they're done, we're done with them. We don't store weapons, we don't take weapons. We definitely don't want people throwing the weapon into a garbage can. So there are things that we understand sometimes that's just the way it ends up working out.
So, Savannah, we did hear you say earlier in the story that the fines can be pretty significant, anywhere from $3,000 up to $15,000. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it is, and it's a wide range, right? So the amount that you'll actually pay will depend on a few different factors. For instance, if you're a first-time offender and police decide it was an accident, you're likely to be fined on the lower end of that spectrum, $3,000 or so, especially if it was unloaded as well. But if you are intentionally trying to conceal it, that's when you see those super hefty fines. So, for instance, APD and TSA both cited to me when I spoke with them an example of a time a few years back when someone tried to bring a gun through Atlanta TSA and the weapon was hidden like inside a gaming console. So in that case, they knew that person was intentionally trying to hide it, and that's a time where they're not going to get off with a slap on the wrist. Now, there are some occasions where someone would not face charges or a fine, but Mark Howell with TSA says that's rare.
We take a look at these and we issue a civil penalty in almost every instance. There are some small situations where that does happen. And a lot of times, one I'll cite is like with the military. With military members, if they're on orders, sometimes there's a mistake that's made. They don't have the paperwork that they're supposed to have, and we sometimes that is handled outside of in their separate UCMJ system.
And we also saw earlier in the story there that moment that the gun went off in Atlanta's airport. I was actually flying out of Atlanta that day when that happened.
Really?
Yeah, it was really scary. I wasn't in the middle of it, but I was at the airport that day. And so what is kind of scary is that you hear that so many of these guns being found are loaded.
Yeah, and that's crazy you were there that day. I mean, imagine you hear a gunshot go off in the airport, the scariest place to hear something like that. And it does make sense that a lot of them are loaded. I was curious about that too. I asked Mark Howell with TSA about why that is. Here's what he said.
If you live in an open carry or constitutional carry state, most people carry those firearms loaded because they're carrying them for their protection. And it becomes part of a daily routine. You head out the door with your wallet, your phone, your keys, and your gun. But the days that you're traveling, you really got to switch that and really know what you're planning to do with that firearm. Are you planning to travel with it, or are you planning to leave it at home? If you're planning to leave it at home, leave it at home. If you're planning to travel with it, make sure that you're doing it the right way.
Now, to that point, Mark also said they don't just fine people who accidentally bring a gun through TSA. They'll also fine you if you packed it in your checked luggage incorrectly. Apparently that happens pretty often too, and there are really specific rules you have to follow about packing a gun, and you need to know the laws of where you're going as well, because they might differ from the rules in Georgia. Here's what Mark said about that.
If you're able to open carry in Georgia, for example, and you travel to New York, very different gun laws there. You may not want to take your firearm with you if you're traveling to New York, because there's very strict gun laws there. So know the rules. Number two is making sure you pack it the right way. It needs to be in a hard-sided case with padding. The firearm needs to be completely unloaded with ammunition stored separately in the inside of the box. And you need to make sure that it's completely secured and locked up before you bring it to the airport.
Yeah, so a lot of people, we posted this story on social media. A lot of people were surprised that no one's facing charges. I think APD's point in initially saying, look, you're going to face charges if you bring a loaded weapon to TSA was because it's dangerous. Like we saw in that incident from 2021, the gun went off in the bag. I mean, a lot of these weapons are loaded and they're just kind of thrown into a backpack or a suitcase, and that can be really dangerous.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were surprised that no charges are being filed. But at the same time, Atlanta police are like, well, what can we do? The Georgia law is the Georgia law.
Yeah, and there are consequences, even if it's just a fine in most cases.
A big fine. I mean, $3,000 on the very lowest end. That's,
a lot.
I mean, in this economy,
oh yeah,
that's
a lot.
lot.
Savannah, thank you so much for shedding light on this, and of course, bringing this and many other investigations to our attention. And we do want to remind all of you viewers that if you have a story that you would like to share with Savannah or any on the 11Alive News Investigates team, you can call this number, 404-873-9111, or send the team an email by reaching out to investigates@11alive.com. Thanks so much for joining us for Inside 11Alive News Investigates. Take care, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye-bye.